Welcome to the Industry Show. I'm your host, Nitin Bajaj, and joining me today is Raju Reddy. Raju, welcome on the show.
Thank you, Nitin. Glad to be here. Yeah.
Pleasure is all ours. So let's start with who is Raju?
Huh. Well, that's the kind of question. If you ask my wife, you might get a very different answer. Like most
We
spouses,
might
I
do
think
that too.
yeah. Most spouses know their partner better than we do. But anyway, let me attempt that. So I was born and brought up in a small town called Nizamabad. That's in North Telangana, on the border of Maharashtra and Karnataka. Being a border town, across three different states. I often look at that as kind of a wonderful microcosm of India, meaning, different languages, cultures, and all of that. And early on, when I was about a 10-year-old, my dad decided to send me to a military school, science school, Korukonda, near Vizag. And I couldn't get in the armed forces. That's where they train you for the NDA. So most of the top Army, Navy, and Air Force officers today in India come from actually science schools, different science schools across India. So, but I just wasn't cut out for that. And then I went, did my engineering at BITS Pilani, and then came here in early 80s for my master's and, built my professional career all here, including my life as an entrepreneur. One of the things that I, often tell people is, while I couldn't quite get in the armed forces, I believe that the values that you build up early on, a lot of that comes from your family, from your teachers, and knowledge and wisdom comes later. And in many ways, back to the question that you are asking, who is Raju? I believe, the values are what kind of shape your thinking and your philosophy and everything, irrespective of whether I chose to be an entrepreneur or a corporate exec or whatever. So that's kind of my background. Yeah.
So true and so wonderfully put. I did not know about your schooling background. So that's where all the discipline and the hard work comes from. So that's
Yeah. Well, it's things like, putting the team above self and
yes.
integrity and just, but anyway, it's good. I've been fortunate. It's good, educational background as well from Pilani and other places. So yeah, it's.
And it definitely keeps you grounded. I know you to be one of the most humble and down to earth people. So
Oh,
really
thank
respect
you.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Raju, I know you are involved with many different successful teams, businesses, and even philanthropic initiatives. I would love for you to share with us in a few minutes, a, a good composition of what your day looks like.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I mentioned I started my sort of professional career right here in Silicon Valley, worked at Intel for about 10 years, then built a company called Sierra Atlantic that grew to be a, sizable company over a 17-year period that was bought by Hitachi.
Yes.
And we were about 2,500 employees at that time back in 2010. So my life in many ways post 2010 has been quite different from, before that. Once you have an exit like that, which is a fairly, significant outcome for our investors and obviously all shareholders, you then start wondering, how to best use the resources that you didn't have before, time and money. I mean, you never have enough of either, but in my case, I've been very involved with investing and serving in the boards of a lot of tech startups, and both in Silicon Valley and those coming out of India, building for a global market, and in philanthropy, both here in the US and in India. Because I believe it's really important for us, Indian Americans, to be visible, more as positive change makers, in this country, our adopted homeland. So, while my philanthropic pursuits are, quite significant in India now, I think the work here is also important. I've been involved with the India Community Center. In the early years, started a program called Sevathon that still is very active, and that brings together, people from different backgrounds, with an interest in a positive change in the communities they live. And specifically in India, there's an initiative called Kakatiya Sandbox that is in rural India, modeled after the work that Deshpande
Yes.
has been doing in Hubli for over 15 years. And we started this about 10 years ago. When I say we, and that's me and another tech entrepreneur who has built a sizable company in India, a company called Red Bus, Fanindra Sama. And he's much younger than I am, about 20 years younger. And so he and I started this about 10 years ago. And the main purpose of that is to improve income level in rural India. So we pick a close-knit geography, roughly 10 million population. So everything we do is in that area. This is in North Telangana, again, back to my hometown being the center of that. And so we work with a lot of farmers on agri income, improvement, and also with students who come out of colleges without degrees, but with the focus on employability, skilling with a focus on employability, and micro entrepreneurs, a lot of women entrepreneurs, things like that. So it's a fairly sizable operation today, and so that's kind of how this enough to keep me busy. And I've been a big beneficiary of great mentors like Kanwal Rekhi, and so I enjoyed that process working with mostly young first-time entrepreneurs as well. Yeah.
Raju, thanks again for sharing that. And again, your humility is reflecting all through, and I'm not surprised at all. Those are some really big numbers, and I would love to hear a little more about Kakatiya. You mentioned the geography you work in, but if you could share with us the impact of how many people you've been able to help, and what are the projections here in the next couple of years.
Sure. Yeah, again, the basic idea behind this, Nitin, is, see, for India to become an economic superpower, we have to create more economic opportunities outside of the metros. And even this sort of spirit of innovation and the startup ecosystems. Now it's very, very well established now in India. Well, a lot of that, I think the results started pouring in, I would say, mostly in the last 3 to 5 years. It is a long experiment. It took a good 15, 20 years. A lot of the investors who put capital into India to start seeing these kind of returns, right? And people kind of take it for granted. Hey, but there's a lot of, so I think it'll take time. In our case, these are not necessarily just your tech startups, but a lot of So at a high level, I would say there are 3 main constructs to what the sandboxing is about. One, it's a bottom-up form of socio-economic development, meaning unless the local people are an active part of the solution, these changes are not sustainable. So it can be somebody sitting in Hyderabad or Bangalore, let alone Silicon Valley, right? So I spend a lot of time, actually, I make trips to India, typically 4 to 5 trips every year. So I'm there once every 2 to 3 months, and mostly out in the villages and all that. And today we have, about 300 employees just in Kakatiya Sandbox across different villages. There's another 700 or so in Desh's Hubli Sandbox. So between the 2 places, it's 1,000 employees. It's the same legal entity that runs these programs. And so it's a fairly sizable organization. And in Telangana, Kakatiya Sandbox, I would say we have touched roughly about 2 million lives over the last 10 years. Wow. And about 500,000 of that in life-altering ways, where their income has sort of doubled, or a lot of people getting new jobs, or things like that. And so it's still a small fraction of the potential and the possibility. I tend to think of it like, if there are 10 such ecosystems around if there are 20 such ecosystems around the country, that's 10 million people for each. So that's 200 million people. That's 25% of rural India, right? Now, that's kind of the big picture, if you will, of what's possible if you can create these sort of transformations. I'll give you an example. Today, there's a Thai chapter in Nizamabad, started about 5 years ago. One of the most vibrant chapters anywhere in the world, certainly the smallest city with a Thai chapter, a city of just 5 lakh people. But it's all run by young people in their 20s, late 20s, early 30s. And also non-tech businesses. almost exactly the kind of things that Thai Global really needs to, right? And that's very exciting when you see this sort of change. Yeah. So the way I look at this thing is, I do it for my own joy. I'm not, I don't view any of this as like I'm trying to do anybody any favor, because I get a lot out of these, especially when you can see the impact with such little intervention, the amount of difference it makes to whether the farmer or some of these young students coming from the villages who have very little sort of access to the outside world in terms of the opportunities and all that, and when they get jobs, or to see a vibrant Thai chapter from in this small town where I was born and grew up. It's very rewarding. It takes time, but it's very rewarding when it happens. Yeah,
it is rewarding indeed. And I've come to realize that giving back is a very selfish thing, right?
absolutely.
You get
Very
so
well
much
said.
more back in return.
Yeah.
That and you can only know that once you start doing it. And I try to encourage as many people as I can. And then, of course, with examples from leaders like you, it makes things so much easier for people to understand and comprehend that giving is the only way to receive.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. I completely. I mean, I've been a big beneficiary of that, and Thai, Silicon Valley. I mean, that's one thing we take for granted, but Silicon Valley does have a beautiful culture, and not just in the Indian American community, but across all, just in terms of mentoring and all of that, right? And I've been a huge beneficiary of that. And yeah, so it's just
So true.
continuing tradition. Yeah.
But I have to say, congratulations and kudos to you for doing what you do, for creating such huge impact. I mean, touching 2 million lives in a positive way, and many of them in a substantial way. I mean, I know for a fact a lot of these people, their household incomes is doubling, quadrupling, right?
Yeah.
And it's a life-size altering event for them. And what comes with that, in addition to the money, is just that sheer confidence that we can do this and we can go on and not just support ourselves but our families. That's huge. That's the generational change.
Yeah. No, you bring up a very good point. One of the big things is, I am a big believer in this, the power of relatable role models, right? In other words, when I see one of these young kids or students, who come from a village where her dad is a BD worker or a day labor, and then she goes to one of these programs and gets a job, and some of them even got into companies like Accenture and Google, MNCs, and who were previously unemployed, right? And then that makes a huge difference to the other people in that village. Then they start believing what's possible. Even though I may be from that part of the country or the world, they can relate to me because, whatever, if you can call it success with my career, I had that somewhere outside India. And, even if I'm from same place. Whereas when one of those people, coming from that background does, it's the same thing for me. When I chose to be an entrepreneur, I could see people like Kanwal Rekhi or Suhas Patil. I said, hey, if they can do it, I can.
True.
I couldn't relate to Bill Gates or any of the other guys who were immensely successful here in US. So I think that's a big factor. Once that starts happening, then sort of the flywheel starts moving if you get enough of those. Yeah.
So true, and very valid point. And that's what we're hoping, that small spark, through these. And we've been fortunate to share some of these amazing stories through which we are able to make that connection and say, hey, maybe I can do this too.
Yeah.
Right? That's huge.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Raju, despite all of these successes, I would love for you to share if there is a challenge, and if so, what is that one big challenge that you're facing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course, there are plenty of, I mean, you mean with the things that I'm doing today, or just overall things that, yeah. I mean, I could probably talk about multiple things, but one of the things is, early on, since I talked quite a bit about, the Sandbox, people were very suspicious in a way. And, out when we went to the villages, skeptical, I must say.
Right.
And naturally, they thought, well, why is this guy doing? Does he want to get into politics or, and I'm glad they had those questions for me. And honestly, all I could say is, hey, listen, I really don't have any of that. And this is my background. I'm from this place, so I care for the place. And I'm in a position. I was not in this position 3 years ago, 5 years ago. And, I'm still experimenting with these. I think here are some ideas that will work. And that's why it's called Sandbox, because we experiment with different ideas and, some. And so they gave me enough benefit of doubt, I suppose. And now nobody asks that question, right? And then, one of the big issues, especially in the rural areas, is, getting the right sort of talent to run. I said we have 300 people.
Yes.
And, whether it's for profit or not for profit, or nations for that matter, leadership really, it all comes down to leadership. So having the right sort of people leading the organization and, building the right culture that continues to attract, nurture great talent, that's extremely important. And that becomes orders of magnitude more challenging in a small town, because the metros is where a lot of the opportunities are for people to move. And, but it's okay. You don't need too many people. You just need enough good ones. So in fact, we have now a young guy in his late 20s as the CEO, Manish Jaiswal, who came in about a year and a half ago. He's from Gorakhpur and NIT Trichy grad, brilliant person. And, so there are enough people like that who still have that idealism and want to do something for the community. And so he actually moved to Nizamabad and building the organization. He's been doing fantastic work. So I would say that's the hard part, and also trying to build enough local capacity for this change. And we've this is all funded by Desh, Funny Eye, and some other HNIs who've been very generous in supporting us. And of course, the CSR program actually in India has been very impactful. So that gives us more avenues. Yeah. So I would say those are, it's mainly the capacity, the human capacity, the leadership capacity to run initiatives like this in rural areas. I would say that's the top one. Yeah.
I think with the success and the ongoing impact you're able to show, but also with the leadership, you, Funny, Desh, all of you being there, that makes it a little easier for people to make the choice and come to say,
we like to think so. I mean, I have at least 2-3 calls. I mean, every week I have a scheduled call with my CEO, and in between 1 or 2 other calls, but also drop level. And then, like I said, I go there once every 2 to 3 months.
Right.
One of the things is, I think my entrepreneurial background, I believe, is also helpful in this for all of us, actually, for Desh, me, and Funny. In many ways, it's sort of taking entrepreneurial mindset to addressing social challenges, right? And that, as Desh likes to say, if you can combine the compassion of the nonprofit world with the execution excellence of the for-profit world, then you get outstanding results. And I think that's a little bit of what, I think we've been able to bring to our Sandbox initiative. Yeah.
And, I would like to remember this one thing that Desh said when I met him the first time. He said, the goal and the business of a nonprofit should be to get out of the business. So you do such a good job with the nonprofit that it does not need to exist anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. It's not a market share issue or anything. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Good. Completely. Yeah.
Raju, on the flip side of this challenge, what's an opportunity that you're most excited about?
Yeah, one thing, of course, for the Sandbox, I think is very real. When I see these lives transformed, and like the Thai chapter that I gave as an example, for sure. And it's very real, and it's happening. India, there is now so much more optimism in general, all across India, wherever you go. And so that's very encouraging. And we got a young population, which is both a challenge and, of course, a great opportunity. And I believe the latter is, more likely how it will sort of evolve. And one specific area that sort of not so much in philanthropy, but really it's entrepreneurship. It's the rise of these product startups from India, these young first-time entrepreneurs coming from middle-class families that are building some exceptional companies. And I honestly believe they are comparable to the very best that you find in Silicon Valley today. And these are big dreamers. I mean, the scale of their ambition, they're not thinking about just building, another unicorn or whatever that measure might be, but truly build the top global brand in that space. I mean, there are companies like Postman, for example.
Yes.
Abhinav Asthana, young man in his 30s. Most of developers use, almost 25 million developers use the product. There's a company called Quizzes, which has 70 million monthly active users. Not many people know about this company. 1/2 of all US schools are using the product, and it's got an NPS of 81. Just amazing. Very quietly, he's built up this company. Yeah, and there are companies like GreyOrange. They are market leader in building warehouse robotics. Again, these are all young first-time entrepreneurs. And Pixel, which does satellites for hyperspectral imaging. Again, this is just 3 years out of college, young man from a small town in Karnataka. So when you see all these, and truly each of them is thinking of building a global brand, and some of them already have evidence of that, right? So I think that's the most exciting part for India, because the downstream impact of that is very significant.
True.
A lot of Indian Americans who've done well in Silicon Valley, while I love that and it's good to see their success, when one of these young people coming from India build a company of that scale here in the global market, which primarily means US market, then that has a much bigger impact than another Indian American starting or building another unicorn or whatever in Silicon Valley, right? So that, because again, back to our conversation earlier about the power of relatable role models.
Yes.
And these people start doing it. I can already see that in my BITS Pilani alumni group, actually. Yeah, that's one that I've been very actively involved with. Yeah.
True. Raju, as we look forward, I would love for you to take a moment and reflect back on your own journey and share with us 2 examples. One in which things flew your own expectations and became a success beyond your imagination. And on the other end, something that did not work out as you had expected, was a failure, became a lesson.
Yeah. So I think my most sort of direct, experience has been in just building my own startup, Sierra Atlantic, over a 17-year period. And I mean, that's a long time. So I'm one of the slow entrepreneurs to create value, I suppose. And, but I had great mentors and people on the board. There was a time I struggled with as the company was scaling, and the board also had to, get a new CEO, because that was a time when we thought we might be filing for an IPO, and they thought, okay, it's better to get somebody who is a better face, that's, non-Indian, I suppose, or whatever, right? But this is back in early 2000 timeframe. And so that was a hard lesson for me. I mean, I sort of had to, go through that personally myself. There's no other way to sort of learn from it. And in many ways, and subsequently, I was brought back, and the person who came in as the CEO, unfortunately for him, he was a good man, but he just, the timing just didn't work out for him. And it was a tough market as soon as he came in, and, subsequently I was brought back. So I think that was very useful. And then, I always, so we actually, we as in Sierra Atlantic, we bought 4 companies before Hitachi bought us. So I always had this sort of a reluctance to consider buying companies and growing inorganically. And but scale does matter. So it's a learning that I had to go through. And personally, I feel that helped me a lot when Hitachi bought my company, because I had been on the other side of the table. So I kind of knew how to be a good partner when you're on the other side. And yeah. So I would say the Sierra Atlantic journey was quite significant. And then at each stage, you keep learning. I mean, this entire thing about, we talked briefly earlier, uh, this entire entrepreneurial ecosystem in India that's now thriving. I mean, it took 15, 20 years to get here.
Yes.
And so I guess I've learned that, yeah, patience is important. So same thing with my Sandbox, some of these initiatives. It's going to take a time, but when it happens very rapidly,
True.
when it starts producing those results. And we feel like we are kind of getting to that stage in some of our initiatives in the Sandbox now. Yeah, it's exciting. And yeah.
Yeah. I have noticed two very strong trends, both of which you hinted upon. One, the rise of the Indian entrepreneur, the culture, and that ecosystem. Right?
Yes.
Back when I moved to the US, the India that I brought with me was one where we used to joke and make fun that if you're going to become an entrepreneur, nobody's going to give you their daughter. From
True.
there, from
Yeah.
there to now, where startups are considered cool, and there is that expectation, that energy, that positivity around it. So that's one major shift that I've noticed. The other one that you mentioned, where companies wouldn't get funded or couldn't go IPO if an Indian was leading it.
Yes.
Two, going to startups that are pitching for money and would not get funding unless there was an Indian who was a
Yeah.
co-founder.
It's almost become an unfair advantage now,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So really proud on both fronts to not just be seeing it, but to be participating in
Yeah.
this on both ends. And again, congratulations to you with Sierra Atlantic and what you were able to accomplish with that team. And I don't think by any means 17 years is slow. Most overnight successes are 10 plus years anyways. So
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Raju, I would love for us to transition into my favorite part of the show, which we call the one line life lessons.
Mm.
And would love to hear your life lessons for us.
Yeah. 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 So a few things that come to mind. One is good mentors can really change lives, you know, and uh, and mentoring is always a two-way street. It's not like I'm parting with any great wisdom and I learn as much and grow with it, and it's a privilege, right? And so that's one thing I feel, irrespective of whether it's building a startup or a career in a company professionally or not for profit. I think having good mentors in your life, I think goes a long way. And for people who are in a position, a privilege to do it, it is a privilege to do that, to be mentors to others, right? And the other thing I can think of is volunteer your time, when you can, for whatever cause appeals to you. Uh, Personally, for me, some of my best friendships, both professionally and at a personal level, have actually come through the nonprofits. In fact, so many of the entrepreneurs that I've invested where I had the best outcomes financially, intellectually, emotionally, are people that I actually met in some nonprofit context somewhere. So it actually is, in some ways, a selfish motive if you think about it. So because what happens is when you go volunteer at one of these places, it's a self-selected group of people. They're coming there because they care about something, and they're also people who have certain talent to offer. And So yeah, it's crazy when I look back at the number of people that I've met, who have later on invested in their startup or something like that, or that have done, like the entire Falcon X initiative that I do today. Most of the founders there are people that I met in some nonprofit context. So I strongly recommend that volunteer time where you can. Yeah. And the other thing is we spend too much time when we talk about startups. We spend too much time on tech, product, markets, and not enough on the people and culture. At the end of the day, startups is a people business. So the people and culture that make it happen are many ways a lot more important than the other things that we talk quite often about. Yeah. I don't know what else. Yeah, these may not be just short one line, but we talked about this. I'm a big believer in the power of relatable role models. So if you're the person who's trying to drive a change, in philanthropy or entrepreneur, whatever, yeah, try and get those sort of relatable role models and not just, people who have done well and who can be a role model. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, and building a startup, I mean, it's very stressful. It's a very high risk thing, but the rewards last a lifetime when you get it right. And I would say give yourself time to breathe, because too often, people are so caught up with it, and you have to have the discipline of just, getting the time for yourself, whether it could be a walk or a run or bike or a swim or whatever it is, right? Just, I think being, sort of emotionally, mentally, and physically, fit. I think it's very important, especially when you're doing startups. And yeah, I mean, those are some of the things that and I mentioned early on about the sort of importance or role of values, and those are often shaped by your early years in life, coming from your family, your parents, teachers, school. Knowledge and wisdom can come later, but I think the values, yeah, that you, and in many ways, I believe one of the reasons why Indian Americans are so much more successful than most other communities today, either as CEOs or tech entrepreneurs, not just they have good math and educational background, that's absolutely an important part of it, but I think the culture and the values that we were fortunate to grow up with, uh, I think are a very important part of what makes these leaders so successful. Yeah.
So true. And I love what you said about knowledge and wisdom can come after, right? Oftentimes we are trying to seek that knowledge, seek that wisdom without having that foundation of values in place. And culture, your teachers, your relatives, your elders can give us that good foundation
Yeah.
upon which the knowledge and wisdom can come
Yeah.
and guide us in that right direction. So I love how you put it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. Again, this is just sort of my, when I think about what may have worked for me, or
Mhm.
and through the experience of others that I've had the opportunity to work with closely. But yeah, good.
Raju, thank you so much for sharing your journey, your story, and your life lessons with us. We really appreciate it. And thanks again for all you do, for who you are, and wish you continued success in all your for-profit and non-profit ventures. As you said, it's not truly non-profit because it's, again, gives us so much more to look forward to and learn from the success of others. So thank you.